Throughout history, architecture has stood as a representation of society, reflecting the values, successes, and eventual downfall of civilizations over time. From the monumental structures to the residences and buildings that make up the fabric of a city, we can learn a lot about the people who inhabited them long before our time. By studying the built environment of the past, combined with modern-day research on psychology and the environment, we're coming to understand the effects of architecture on people in entirely new ways. As we go back to the past, classical to Byzantine architecture, now we are going to talk first about Greek architecture.
Greek architecture from 8th century before Christ to 2nd century. Geographical influence. The Greek civilization was bounded by two sides, by the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. Athens, as its center kingdom, contains the upper city, known as a citadel. Geological influence, where marble is their chief building material, they also have ample supplies of building stone. Climatic influence is where climate was intermediate between hot and cold, which favored an outdoor life dramatically. Most of the public ceremonies took place in an open area, even in religious rites due to limited public buildings other than temples. Religious influence. Aegeans worship nature while Greek represents their deities by large statues. They worship natural phenomena. Social and political influence. The chief diversion were music, dancing, wrestling, boxing, gymnastic, and bullfighting. Women took part in hunting and more strenuous games as well in craft work. Forms of the Greek government. First is the tyrannic, second is aristocrat, and lastly the democratic. Historical influence. Periods of development. Early period 3000 BC to 700 BC. Aegeans, Minoans, Mycenae are the only people in Greece. The Hellenic period is essentially the columnar and trabeated Acropolis, which was crowned by Parthenon in the 16th century. Parthenon was converted into a Christian church. Architectural style and character. The unique style and character that each Greek architecture has is simplicity and harmony, perfection of line, perfection of proportions, and refinement of details.
Minoan architecture. Minoan architecture was graceful, beautiful, and colorful. Building materials were usually native stone and clay, with timber used for reinforcement. Columns were tapered different from classical Greek and Roman columns. The cities were unfortified with paved roads. The windows were unglazed, though there are a few windows fitted with thin semi-transparent alabaster. This would let in the light, but it is not see-through. The palaces were multi-storied, with many rooms and passages quite labyrinth in character. They may well have given rise to the story of Labyrinth, the classical Greek myth about Minotaur, said to dwell in ancient Crete at the palace of King Minotaur. One of the examples of most notable buildings in the Minoan architecture is the tallest dome. Many tallest dome has been found in Crete dating back in pre-palatial times. They were usually round in shape, with one short entrance. Although tallest domes were rectangular in shape, were not unusual, like the ones found in Palicastro, and some were cut into hillside. Most of them is freestanding structures.
Hellenic architecture. Hellenic architecture uses rectangular plan, and temple gateways are called propylaea. Colonnades surround the temple. Greeks describe their temples according to the number of columns and by the arrangement of exterior columns in relation to the naos. Greeks also describe their temples according to the number of columns at the entrance front. Ceilings were ornamented and treated with timber-paneled coffers, lacunaria. Lacunaria or coffer in architecture is a series of sunken panels in the shape of square, rectangle, or octagon in a ceiling. Walls are made up of stones, and the marble sculptures completed the buildings. Mural paintings on the wall of the temples were highly developed. Optical illusions were corrected from horizontal lines not to appear dropping or sagging from the center. As slight convex were formed for stylobates, cornices, and architraves.
Asian architecture. Asian architecture, which has a low pitch or flat roof on multi-story structure and with a stairway that was developed for circulation. Houses are called as megara, and palaces were principal building types. Enclosed porch, living apartment proper, and thalamus, which are for the sleeping room, are the areas of megara. Asian architecture has a specific masonry technique. Cyclopean is the masonry technique that is made up of huge stone blocks laid mortar. Polygonal, a masonry which is constructed with stones having polygonal faces. The rectangular wall has a block of stone cut into regular blocks. Inclined blocks, stones with inclined blocks.
Roman architecture from 2nd century to 4th century AD. Geographical influence, where Rome has a commanding position in the Mediterranean Sea, which enabled it to act as an intermediary in spreading art and civilization over Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa. Geological influence, where the chief building material was concrete, which rendered the finest example of Roman architecture. They also used marbles, terracotta, bricks, sand, gravel, and timber. One of the most important ingredients of concrete is pozzolano, which is made up of stone or brick, rubble, and a mortar. Climate influence, where Rome was divided into 3 regions: first, North Italy; second, Central Italy; and third, South Italy. It was divided because of the variety of climates. Religious influence. Early forms of Roman religion were animistic in nature, believing that spirits inhabit everything around them, people included. The first citizens of Rome also believed they were watched over by the spirits of their ancestors.
Social and political influence. Important emperors who patronized Rome are Nero, Vespasian, Trajan, Hadrian, Septimius Severus, Caracalla, and Diocletian. Historical influence. Periods of development. Etruscan is known for the use of radiating art. They were the earliest civilization and the great builders who invented the Tuscan capital, where temples were oriented in the south. Roman adopted the columnar and cubated style of the Greeks and developed the arc and the vaults and the dome of Etruscans. Architectural character style. In Roman architecture, they are known to have vastness and magnificence, ostentation, and orateness. Roman used art in structural innovation. One of the examples of the most notable buildings in the Roman architecture is the Forum Romanum. The first architect was Augustus in 29 BC. Second architect was Arch of Titus in 81 AD. Lastly, Arch of Septimus. It is located in the Palatine Hill and Capitoline in the center of Rome. The Forum was the importance of the oldest and was used in Hypodrome.
Early Christian architecture from the 4th century AD. Geographical influence. Christianity has its birth in Judea, eastern province of the Roman Empire. Early Christian architecture was influenced by the existing Roman art. Climate influence. The climatic condition of Roman provinces where Christianity was established naturally modified the style. The fiercer the sun and hotter climate necessitated small windows and other Eastern features. Religious influence. Christianity spread out rapidly and was an important factor in the development of Christian architecture and inspired the building of some of the greatest architectural monuments.
Social and political influence. Constantine was the prime character but was not proclaimed emperor. He removed his empire from Rome to Byzantium and developed a new style of architecture.
Byzantine architecture from the 4th century to 6th century. Geographical influence. From Byzantine, Constantine renamed it to Constantinople, now as Istanbul and also called New Rome. It was the architecture of the Eastern Roman Empire, which was developed from early Christian and late Roman antecedent in the 4th century. Geological influence. Geological influence. No good building stones and local materials such as clay for bricks and rubble for concrete were used. Marble was also used, but mostly imported materials. Climatic influence. Semi-tropical, thus flat roofs, was used and combined with domes to counteract the new empire. Religious influence. Political division between East and West, followed by the division of churches due to iconoclastic movement and the painting figures in decoration as a substitute. Early Christian basilica was merged with the dominical system of Byzantine.
Historical influence from 5th to 11th century was one of the fluctuating and gradually declining fortunes. The spirit of Byzantine Empire persisted even after the empire had fallen. Constantine had continued up to the present day the seat of Patriarch of the Orthodox Church. Architectural style, character. It is recognized in Byzantine architecture that it has a simplicity in the external design which resulted in the use of clay and rubble. Its richness has an internal treatment in importing marble. One of the examples of the most notable buildings in the Byzantine architecture is San Vitale Ravenna. The architect is Justinian and is located in Ravenna, Italy. It is known to be one of the most important surviving examples of early Christian Byzantine art and architecture in Europe. Built for the commemoration of the recovery of Ravenna.
As we end this journey learning the history of architecture from the prehistoric architecture to Byzantine architecture, as we reflect on studying the history of architecture is extremely important because unlike studying history in other disciplinary groups, the purpose of studying the history of architecture when practicing contemporary architecture is to understand how architecture influences the society and its culture today.